You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
A very fine evening to you and yours. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We've got a lot going on, and it is not going to slow down. The Democrats are having a really, really rough time. You say, Tony, how is that different than usual? Because again, no matter how often the Trump administration leaves a small, slight window for just a bit of the old pokey, the Democrats can't seem to pick up on it at all. And of all the issues Democrats should be picking up on, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later with Paul Teller over from Advancing American Freedom. Right now, the discourse in this country is happening between the kind of Bushian Republicans, who some would call more establishment, and then on the other side of things, the kind of the populist isolationists, and in the middle, the traditional conservatives. That's where like 90% of the conversation in this country is going on right now. And I do mean most of the conversation in this country. And the reason is that, first of all, the left really can't enter into the conversation on any of the stuff that's going on. They can't. They can't talk about the economy because their ideas for the economy are truly terrible. Hence, they have no ideas at all. The Trump administration's outmaneuvered them. Their foreign policy sucks and is scorned openly. So what does that leave them with? Social policy domestically? Oh, yeah, that transing the kids thing worked out real well, didn't it? So what do they have? Well, they have their most important issues, which is that illegal immigration is a wonderful thing. And that if you came into this country illegally, they're going to not only try to fight the government from their legislative podiums or their judicial podiums, as Chuck Schumer outlined, but, you know, they're going to do a little direct advisement on how to evade the feds altogether. And here's AOC not only, again, doubling down, tripling down, saying, yeah, I'm going to give people advice on how to break the law, which is, you know what, illegal. She then dares border czar Tom Homan to arrest her, which it's a wild dare. Here's AOC.
When we first did one of these seminars, Tom Homan, then acting director of ICE, said that he was going to threaten to refer me to DOJ because I'm using my free speech rights in order to advise people of their constitutionally guaranteed protections. And they want to do it again today. And to that I say, come for me.
Okay, so you do, in fact, have the right under the First Amendment to tell people how to do things. That's true. You ever notice when a financial advisor or someone in a legal profession suggests that you do something either legally or financially, they'll say, I'm not actually advising you directly to take this legal step or this financial step. That is because in the right court of law, you can be liable for causing significant damages to someone based on false pretense or expertise. And in the case of AOC, yeah, you have constitutional right to say, I sure hope these people do this. You do not have a constitutional right to say, hey, here's how you avoid the law. Here's how you break the law. Nope, because that's conspiring, that's aiding and abetting. That's not something that one can do. So best of luck to AOC. Of course, she's still petty because the last time she argued with Tom Homan, he bent her over his knee.
When you're into the country illegally, it's violation 8 United States Code 1325.
Seeking asylum is legal.
If you want to seek asylum and go through the port of entry, do it the legal way.
And she, of course, had nothing to say to that because AOC likes to pretend that she understands the law. And the law is really not that difficult. Any individual, any classic American can pick up the law and read it, especially the constitutional provisions, get a little background on those Federalist Papers, and read a little bit of court precedent. The idea that Americans in flyover country, in the South, the West, those who aren't in the ivory towers of, for example, Harvard University, which we'll get to, are more than capable of reading the law. This nonsensical idea that if you put up a bunch of fancy words on top of something, this now excludes common Americans from participating is one of the reasons Donald Trump has won so consistently in regions that were dominated by blue labor Democrats. The ivory tower elitism of this country has seen its golden age and has passed because they made promises and they didn't deliver. But that won't stop people like Representative Ilhan Omar the alleged brother marrier, from making some wildly, I think that the vice president of the United States, not to be confused with yours truly, said it best, some pretty openly genocidal, openly segregationist language. Here's Ilhan Omar coping up a storm.
I would say our country should be more fearful of white men across our country, because they are actually causing most of the deaths within this country. We should be profiling, monitoring, and creating policies to fight the radicalization of white men.
Oh, it's never we shouldn't profile people. It's never we shouldn't treat anyone different because of their race, because of their background, because of their sex. It's always, well, actually, have you looked at white men lately? Okay, what do you mean by white men, first of all? Because if someone calls her something different than Somali, she gets very, 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 very upset. So when you mean white, what do you mean? But again, that would be assuming that one could actually hold an intelligent conversation with Ilhan Omar, and I'm not really convinced she can string more than 3 sentences together without taking a breather. And speaking of taking a mental breather, Jasmine Crockett, again, making her like a big headwind in the Democratic Party is a move for sure. She got up over the weekend at a little graduation commencement ceremony, which, fantastic, to complain about herself, because that's really what you want to hear from someone giving your commencement address, is them get up and do a little Seinfeld routine all about themselves. Here's Crockett.
And instead of publicly calling us the N-word, they use racist epithets and suggest that we're ghetto or unqualified.
By the way, the word is epithets, not epithets. They're not like epithets on a cow. If you're going to use big words, use them correctly, please.
Or diversity hires, even though we're all more, oftentimes than not, more educated and qualified than they are.
So if you were more educated and more qualified, why does affirmative action need to be a policy? If you are more educated and more qualified than the counterparts of yours who you claim are calling you a diversity hire, then why do there need to be racial quotas? For example, Asian Americans, who tend to have higher levels of academic expertise, when they apply somewhere, or someone from India, great example. I don't see the hospital going, oh, you're looking a little brown. I guess we can't have you here. No, a lot of Indian people, a lot of Asian people seem to have a lot of very high-performing, high-paying jobs. But the affirmative action, but you're more qualified. Ah, yes, okay. Again, when you make it about race and color, when you step up to the plate, you are now responsible for the statistics. Again, the original way, the Martin Luther King Jr. way, is saying judging someone by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. That's the way that a society really should function, because then you can actually make judgments based on good things about culture and bad things about culture, and things that are fundamentally excellent and things that are fundamentally garbage. But, again, the same left who thinks that it's that Americans don't want brown people coming up from Central and South America, have no idea or understanding that actually there are a lot of excellent, fantastic groups culturally that emigrate to this country from South America. Most of them are Catholic, and most of them are exceptionally Hispanic. And they're wonderful, hardworking people. Why? Because they assimilate to the country. They become a part of the community. They don't try to undermine it. And we'll get to that with CNN and MS-13 in just a bit. But the media outlets are having the hardest time. The media outlets are falling apart. CBS and NPR, of course, had their federal funding stripped away from them by the Trump administration, which has been a long time coming, thank God. So the head of PBS decided that it was the right time to, just babble incoherently some of the wildest claims I've ever heard.
I would say if you think PBS is biased, compared to who? Name one news organization in America, and I shouldn't be defending us, I get paid by PBS, but I'm going to do it, who's more straight down the line than we are. Is it?
Okay, so we'll talk about this over on the live stream side of things. Radio crew, we got to send you to commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. All right, let me explain first of all, how bias works in media. Every single thing on earth is tainted by bias. You are a person. You have wants, needs, desires, hates. That's just something that is ingrained in every single person. You are biased. You cannot strip that bias away no matter how hard you try. Bias does not just come in how you report a story, because you have 24 hours a day. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but there's a lot of stinking news all the time. There's a lot of stories from all over the country, every second of every day. So it not only matters how you cover a story, but also what stories you cover. And if you remember, NPR and PBS explicitly chose not to run the story days before the 2020 election on Hunter Biden's laptop being used for foreign purposes, for corrupt purposes that clearly indicated at the time, the ex-vice president and then soon to be the president of the United States, Joe Biden, had corruptly engaged with foreign officials through his son. They didn't cover it. That, in fact, is a function of bias. That 110% is. Right now, I have a bit of a bias towards more national news, though I broadcast out of Indiana. There are some Indiana stories that I do not think that someone tuning in Arkansas or in Iowa or in Colorado or Florida would find interesting. And the media has not figured out that people recognize multiple kinds of bias. And so in PBS, again, I'm biased. I'm going to let you know right off the front so that you can see the facts and then hear my take on it. I'm a pundit. I'm an analyst. That's what I do. That's the whole national correspondent thing playing out in real time. But if someone tells you they are unbiased and then they end up being exceptionally biased, that is a sin. That is a mark against the organization. It's why they're failing so clearly. And by the way, this wasn't just, surrounding the election. This is still going on. Here's MSNBC making yet another correction this morning.
And now let's circle back to a segment from Friday's show. Frank Figliuzzi was on that morning during this hour discussing the work of administration officials. At the end of that segment, Figliuzzi said that FBI Director Kash Patel has reportedly been more visible at nightclubs than at his office at FBI headquarters. This was a misstatement. We have not verified that claim. We will be right back.
Yeah, and they'll do the exact same kind of nonsense since. Last but not leastly here, and I'll talk about the USA Today numbers falling out here in just a bit. But my friend and colleague, Kylie Griswold, over at The Federalist, pointed out that ProPublica won a Pulitzer. Why did they win a Pulitzer? Well, because they claimed Georgia mother Amber Thurman died because of pro-life laws. That's not even remotely true. This particular Georgia mother took abortion pills that she ingested against the medical prescription regulation and advisement to kill her unborn twins. And taking the medicine irresponsibly, which again, abortion pills are not safe for women at all. They are very, very dangerous. And she took them incorrectly beyond that. So ProPublica and all these journalists who are busy kissing themselves on the butt don't seem to understand that as long as they award each other for not just flagrantly biased, but downright dishonest, again, you want to talk about disinformation, lying about why a mother died in order to smack some legislator in Georgia is disgusting. As long as they continue to do this, it will be worse for them. And they deserve absolutely every single ounce of it. Now, Brian Stelter, the famed potato who is out and then is back in at CNN. He has decided to post a picture of the "I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill" image. Said right now newsrooms need to do a better job of incorporating Constitution 101 into their news coverage. Complaining that the Trump administration needs to get it together constitutionally. 2 years ago, he was literally hosting a guy from the World Economic Forum claiming that the Constitution was old and needed to be thrown out because of hate speech. Incredible. We'll be back in a second. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. Let's talk about some international stuff because we haven't really touched on a lot of it. There's been so much domestic news and I always try to prioritize that. There is, unfortunately, a little bit on the international side to cover. And it starts with the way apparently all great news stories do now, with a meme. So the crew who runs the White House Communications Department, of whom I have had the privilege to get to know a little bit, a couple of them here and there, over the last couple of weeks, one who I've worked with for a long time, stellar crew. They have realized that people don't engage with a lot of old, stodgy articles just because they come from big publications. And by the way, the first person to realize this in the media was Barack Obama with the millennials back in 07 and 08, who leveraged social media engagement as the way to engage with the millennials at the time. Now, with the last of the millennials, that'd be me, and all the way down to the Gen Z and I Alpha crew, the Trump administration has figured out, or I really should say the Trump campaign figured out, that just giving people a chance to laugh, making memes, making jokes, and just kind of throwing out policies and ideas behind them is an effective way of doing media. Again, Wendy's has been doing this. Other social media companies have been doing this. It's not a new idea, but to do so in a way that is kind of with reckless abandon, I just don't care, which is usually what kills any kind of a political account, is like over caring and over obsessing. If you have an editor-in-chief or a managing editor or an HR team in any kind of a company, and you are obsessing over marketing, oh, we can't say that because someone might be offended, and oh my goodness, we have to make sure this is fine. It's going to kill the product. It's going to kill the product. Committees kill writing. Just ask SNL. So the Trump administration over the weekend, again, Pope Francis passed away. It's been a couple of days now. There's a lot of conversation about who should be the next pope. I'm going to make this case as a Baptist. It should be the African Cardinal Sarah, who is one of the most incredible individuals of all time. But the Trump administration's White House account posted a picture of the President of the United States, again, a little AI image like the Pope. Now, it's kind of funny. Maybe not your brand of tea, but not bad, not bad. As a Protestant, I chuckled. I didn't really guffaw because, again, I'm a Baptist. I don't care. But okay, funny. This is the same kind of thing Trump's been doing for a long time. Or do you not remember the Trump trading cards where he was a cowboy and an astronaut? And so, of course, the left-leaning members of society, the Democrats, have decided that they're ready to revive their Catholic faith. You know, the pro-abortion stuff and the LGBTQ stuff, yeah, they don't actually deal with theology, but man, someone posts a picture, like a meme, oh no. And so people started losing it over on the left over the weekend. And I cracked up and said, well, J.D. Vance, the vice president, he's a Catholic. I bet he's furious and outraged. And no, it's just a joke. It's just funny. That's really all there is to it. By the way, as a reminder, the Democrats, when they do Christian imagery, it's to mock Christianity. Remember the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, the drag nun group that the LA Dodgers decided to sponsor, which is insane? Or, right before the election, Catholic Gretchen Whitmer deciding that it was time to do some type of weird lesbian fetishistic Dorito Eucharist ceremony. Oh yeah, here's what that looked like. Ugh. Yeah, how'd that work out for you there in Michigan, hon? So on that international front, I really do love seeing the preening, the posturing, the pearl clutching, things that do and don't matter to people. Always tickles me, and we'll, of course, get over to that in the Middle Eastern side of things here in a couple of minutes. China is struggling. They are. The more we continue into this trade war with China, the more we see the paper-thin, bubblegum, and popsicle stick economy of China. The Chinese economy is 100% built on the United States. 100%. You say, well, but they sell to other countries. Yes, whose economies all use the reserve dollar. The United States single-handedly subsidized China against the USSR after the Sino-Soviet split. And since then, the United States has been propping up China at the expense of Americans. And so the lovely, darling communists over in Beijing have discovered that, wow, it turns out that when the United States starts marking things up and all of a sudden the Temu cheap crap isn't as cheap anymore, First of all, Americans buy from other countries like India. And number two, China has nothing to fall back on whatsoever. And so China has gone from, well, we're not talking to the Trump guys, we're not talking to anybody, to begging for kinds of tariff reprieve from not just the United States, but other Southeast Asian countries. And that's going to continue if Xi doesn't get himself communisted in the classic manner. The Trump administration certainly is not helping the Chinese crew right now after the executive order today banning gain-of-function research in places like China and Iran.
The first relates to gain-of-function research. Gain-of-function research is a type of biomedical research where pathogens are adulterated, viruses are adulterated to make them more potent or to change the way that they function. Many people believe that gain-of-function research was one of the key causes of the COVID pandemic.
Correct. Just because a lab is in some other country and there's like a chance, and I'm not talking about like your standard roll of the dice, like a 6-sided die chance. I mean, like there's a 100-sided die chance that rolls forever, that you might get something good out of it. That's not a good enough reason to shove a ton of money into a communist-funded and ran project. You know who doesn't deserve our money, much less your taxpayer money? China. The Trump administration should follow through and ban TikTok until they get their game together on that side of things too. That brings us over to Iran. So Iran, which backs all of the little Islamic radical terror groups in the Middle East, is very upset because the Trump administration has now made it explicitly clear that Iran is not going to be enriching any uranium because that leads to nuclear weapons. And additionally, Trump made this point, and it's dead on, that if Iran wants nuclear power so bad, they can buy the stuff from others. And why do they need nuclear power so much? They're covered in what? Oil.
Iran. Your administration has had conversations with Iran. Is the goal of these talks limiting Iran's nuclear program or total dismantlement?
Total dismantlement.
That's all you'll accept?
That's all I'd accept. Now, there's a new theory going out there that Iran would be allowed to have civilian, meaning to make electricity but I say, they have so much oil, what do they need it for? But
Correct. Why do they need it? And you say, well, we don't have any right to say. Yes, we do, because nuclear stuff does not stay in one's country. And to this point, by the way, I will, we've had him on the show before. I have a lot of respect for him. Matt Walsh over from the Daily Wire. He's a good guy. I like him a lot. He had a really bad take on Iran today. He said, quote, Iran is not launching a nuclear weapon at the United States. Be serious. Iran is not a threat to my family's safety. Okay. Guys, this is not North Korea. I don't know if you know this about Islamic terrorists, but they kind of take things across borders and then blow them up outside of other buildings and, drive vehicles through crowds of people. You ever seen the Norks do that? Yeah, me neither. So if Iran, the principal founder of Muslim terror that is currently holding U.S. citizens hostage, that has killed U.S. Marines by the boatload, that has consistently fueled the cost to the American taxpayer, harmed us and our allies, but mostly harmed us, that if they had a nuclear device, you don't think they'd put that on a shipping container and detonate a dirty nuke in LA or New York? You think they wouldn't be satisfied with only 40,000 dead if it was like not 100,000 dead? You don't have, again, the idea that the alternative is, there's going to be a massive regional war. According to whom? What's the foot soldier capacity of Iran? Tell me about their air force and their navy. What are they going to do? You think Putin's really going to go to war for Iran? Nope. How do I know? Because when we killed Qasem Soleimani, they did nothing. You think China's going to go to bat for him? No. They're desperate and they need our economy. So who's going to go to bat for him? Afghanistan? Pakistan? No. Absolutely not. And this will bring us over to the Houthi side of things and then a conversation with Paul Teller. We'll catch that for the radio crew in a minute. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Last but certainly not least, and I'm sorry, I do want to make this incredibly clear regarding Iran and the Houthis. So this is where the Bushian side of conservatism or the right completely loses me, is the old Bush line that the heart yearns for freedom and the W stands for honesty. No, I don't think we need to nation build anywhere either. The goal of the United States over the next couple of years should be to bomb where we please, those who touch our boats, and then number two, to get Israel to a point where it is no longer on military aid whatsoever. And then the United States can be wholly in economic interest mode for the canal in the Middle East. And while we're at it, the United States should just take the Suez Canal. We're the ones who defend it, like every other canal. So as far as the United States policy goes, nothing involved should be nation building. We shouldn't be building Iraq or Afghanistan or Gaza or Iran if we topple the regime. Nope. Just you touch our boats, we'll turn you into a crater. That's pretty simple foreign policy. Let our boats go where they want because Americans want to buy things and sell things because that's good for Americans. Touch our boats, and like the shores of Tripoli, they'll be glass. Good foreign policy. And as the Trump administration continues on, they are quickly running out of patience, which I love watching in real time. Because if you don't think that Marco Rubio, who now has 47 jobs in this administration, is quickly losing his patience with Iran and the Houthis. So the Houthis did, in fact, from Yemen get one ballistic missile provided by Iran through the Iron Dome and the THAAD U.S. battery systems. And in doing so, they were able to strike Ben Gurion Airport, which, that is a strike against Israel. So Israel responded by bombing an entire port in Yemen of the Houthis, which, by the way, in case you didn't know this about foreign policy, that's how you do foreign policy. If someone hits you back, you hit them back 10 times as hard. You don't hold a committee. You don't say, oh, please don't hurt us. You don't try to buy off the pirates. That's what Europe did for centuries. You eliminate the threat and say, if you touch us again, I will not only remove you, I will remove your family and your family's family. I'm sorry, I don't understand what else there is to it. I mean, don't touch our boats, don't touch our stuff. Get everyone to the point where they are no longer taking U.S. financial or military aid of any kind. Presto. And I'm sorry, I do not mean to be so I don't know, snarky or perhaps maybe this comes across as arrogant. I truly do have a lot of patience for a lot of perspectives on foreign policy. But when it comes to bending over backwards to not upset Iran because you imagine that they're going to do something, I guess. You don't care about the war in Syria. Why would you care about the regime collapsing in Iran? Who cares? It's amazing how that only ever seems to go one way. And on that note, by the way, Israel is also just going to go in and just go ahead and take Gaza, which, finally. Just get it done. Just do it. Oh, but we need to. Okay. All right. Great. As soon as the Houthis or Hamas or Hezbollah or whomever decides they want to act like humans and stop using children as meat shields, all right, fine. Then, until then, carry the war out. The reason that wars last forever, A, and B, that wars end up becoming these never-ending slogs that cost other nations resources and untimely amounts of death and are never resolved is because you don't go in and finish a war. You prosecute a war to its fullest. That's how war works. If you're not going to get in a war, then, don't start none, don't be none. And if someone starts some, end it. By the way, that should be how it is with Sinaloa as well, but we'll come back to that later. We're going to go over to Paul Teller in just a second. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
It's a day ending in Y, which means the media is struggling. Well, I mean, not all media, but the legacy media certainly is. So we brought on Paul Teller from the Advancing American Freedom crew to talk just a little bit here and there about the latest and breaking in media pearl clutching and formal apologies. Paul, how's it going?
Good to see you. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
My genuine pleasure. I don't know if you got a chance this morning to see one of the best clips I've seen in a long time from MSNBC. They bring a guy up on camera and he says, well, take a listen.
And now let's circle back to a segment from Friday's show. Frank Figliuzzi was on that morning during this hour discussing the work of administration officials. At the end of that segment, Figliuzzi said that FBI Director Kash Patel has reportedly been more visible at nightclubs than at his office at FBI headquarters. This was a misstatement. We have not verified that claim. We will be right back.
So, I mean, why make the nightclub claims in the first place if you can't back it up? How desperate is this crew?
No, let's face it. Maybe they saw him like once having one drink somewhere in D.C., God forbid, and they just assumed, he was there all the time. I mean, this family man, there's just no chance that was true. So, of course, on its face, it's ridiculous. But why make it up? I think because they're just used to not being really checked in any way, right? The legacy media just kind of says stuff. It hangs out there, and they know that even if it somehow gets checked, it's days later, weeks later, it's a small little blurb or tweet somewhere that nobody sees. And so they just figure it easier to say factually incorrect things and let that live out there in people's brains. It actually goes back to like Brett Kavanaugh, same kind of thing, right? He's a drunk, all these other things they just totally made up. And that still lives in his reputation, things like that. So I think they were hoping to just kind of land a punch that'll last, even if they, quote unquote, have it, retracted or discredited, whatever.
It's a good point because for such a long time, there was this mega monopoly, kind of an oligopoly, in which these network anchors were allowed to basically have carte blanche, whatever they wanted to say, however they wanted to say it. And they could then embellish the basic left-wing talking points, maybe the kind of things that were pushed by NPR or PBS. Then MSNBC would say, well, that's our springboard. Now we're going to catapult into the stratosphere with some extra crazy seasoned on top. And it turns out that oligopoly has been effectively shattered and actions are starting to have consequences.
Yeah, no question. I actually was the victim of that many years ago when a Politico reporter literally said that I was in a room with 200 members of Congress, Republican members, all of whom were chanting that I should be fired. Now, look, maybe they were wishing that their heads, but they certainly weren't chanting it to my face. You'd think you would know, right? When 200 people are chanting anything at you, let alone that you should be fired. But, they ran with it. Apparently, you had two sources verifying it. It was quite bold, but, what are you going to do? This is how they make their money, I guess.
Now, it was Jake Sherman from Politico, if I remember correctly.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well,
wow.
The reason I point that out is because Jake Sherman has a bit of a habit, from my analysis, of asking one or two people about something and then just taking it as gospel. I've seen this consistently in a lot of Politico articles because there are some Politico authors that I wouldn't say a serious soft spot for, but they do try. They're on the left, but they try to be a little fair at times. Some of the crew, though, yeesh. And NPR is a great example of the media apparatus that is finally enjoying a few of its just desserts after some of the most insane left-wing nonsense they tried to pass off as Tim Murtaugh, who was just on the show. He pointed out that NPR is so neutral that in 2022 it posted a trigger warning to make sure no one actually read the Declaration of Independence.
Is that right? Wow. Oh gosh. Yeah, you're right. They're getting their comeuppance, and if your viewers haven't read that latest Trump executive order cutting off funding to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which funds NPR, PBS, right. Just give it a quick read. It's short. It's great because, again, the legacy media will probably depict it as, he's just unjustly going after this one. No, I mean, it's explained in great detail in there how they're violating laws. And there's laws on the books that basically said you can't federally fund something that then turns around and is a partisan activity, does partisan activity.
Especially during election seasons. I mean, I've pointed this out before. This show appears on FCC regulated airspace, on FCC regulated spectrum, as Senator Cruz would say. And so therefore, if I'm going to air part of this show on the air in Oklahoma, in Florida, in Pennsylvania, God knows in Pennsylvania, here in Indiana, no matter where we are during election season, I can't give unfair advantages to one specific candidate, especially in that market. And NPR and CBS, PBS.
PBS, right? Yeah.
To go as far as PBS had in essentially using the kindest, softest words that they could find for various political candidates on the left, and turning around to political candidates on the right and calling them troublesome and problematic and untrustworthy. This isn't.
And here's the thing too. I think most people would agree. No one is saying that those stations have to go away.
Correct.
They just should be privately funded. In other words, like there should be media on the left, media on the right, media in the center, whatever else. Just don't have it taxpayer funded. That's all most folks are saying. Conservative, and even some on the left are saying, yeah, you know what? Should we have a taxpayer funded media organization at all? Is this the Soviet Union? Do we need to have government media? The answer, of course, is no. You could maybe make an argument that when it was created, there wasn't enough, available media for Joe Citizen, whatever. I would question that, to be honest, even back then. But okay, certainly now, to make the argument that they absolutely have to fund this source or these couple of sources, because otherwise Joe Citizen won't have any information, won't have any ability to get a TV news station. I mean, just, it's laughable on its face. So it just needs to go away as a taxpayer funded entity. And if it's so great, well, Hollywood and other folks on the left could fund it, and it'll stay around just fine.
I did an interview on NTD. Mike Leon is the guy. He hosts a left-leaning podcast. I hadn't really heard of it, but we were both on NTD, kind of co-paneling, talking about this Trump executive order. And Mike made a really great point that I was shocked to hear a guy over on the left saying. Now, of course, he disagrees with the amount of bias and what the form of bias kind of looks like. But he agreed that, yeah, there really should not be any federal journalistic apparatuses. Apparatuses, Nick? Apparati? Yeah, very fancy. That are receiving taxpayer dollars. These organizations can find funding in so many different places. And to say, again, with such a small amount of funding, this is his point, such a small amount of their core funding that comes from federal dollars. I mean, to die on the hill of NPR and PBS deserve your money is not going to benefit Democrats in the long term.
Yeah, and you're making a great point. It's interesting they've even continued, to fight that, because there's really no good argument to push back, right? As we talked about, there's no argument that it's needed. There's no argument that people will be deprived of the news and be totally uninformed. Let's face it, right? We all know that most of that target audience for NPR, PBS, it's wealthy, coastal, left-wing elites, right? You want to see shows about orchestras and art openings. We know that, right? That it takes 4 minutes of research on the internet to find that out. So that demographic, by definition, has enough money to keep those facilities alive and running if they want to. If they decide not to, great. But taxpayers shouldn't foot it. And we also know the left would feel the exact opposite if things were flipped. In other words, if these were Trump promoting entities, do you think they would say this is necessary for an informed citizenry? Of course not. Of course not. So
if I over at the Daily Signal started receiving a government check from the Trump administration to post this, that, or the other, there would be hell to pay, and deservedly so. Yeah, exactly. Because I shouldn't be in the position of taking federal money, even though I don't claim to be an unbiased reporter. I'm very clear I'm a columnist. There's one other thing I want to touch on with you very, very quickly here, and it's something that has fascinated me. That I think one of the reasons the left is having this insane meltdown is because they are currently not a part of the national conversation regarding the Trump administration. And it's the strangest thing to see. The left has ostracized themselves by going so far to the left, so infinitely far over, that now you have kind of the moderate kind of, I don't know if I want to say, kind of the Bushian Republican era and the more populist isolationist crew on the right that are having the conversation. And it's interesting because suddenly you have on Fox News or on Newsmax or OAN or News Nation or wherever they may be, you actually see these conversations playing out with real dialogue about what goes into a decision and what comes out of it than I've seen. I mean, I think since listening to Hannity and Combs back in 2005.
You're exactly right. I mean, the left has doubled and tripled down, right, on some of the most extreme policies that they should know by now lost them the election, lost them many elections, right? In 2024.
Your lips to
at
God's
different
ears.
levels.
Yeah.
Now, part of me thinks like maybe we should keep quiet. Don't tell them why they lost those elections. Let them keep thinking it was racism or some mistake or whatever it was. And let them keep doubling and tripling down on their, left-wing extremism. But sometimes it's just almost out of human kindness. You want to just be like, really? You're going to stick with, let's say, men and women's sports? That's going to win you? You don't see how bad that was for you? It's just amazing that they really just kept doubling it down. And same thing goes for NPR, PBS, right? Not only the content there, but the folks that are supporting them, it just keep going all in. It's baffling.
So how do we, and this again, with advancing American freedom, when we're talking about different nonprofit organizations, when we're talking about think tanks, we're talking about groups, those of us that are trying to decide, that are trying to analyze what is going on right now and how do we take things forward in a positive light. I think that we need to ensure right now that the different parts of the right are, I don't want to say engaging in meaningful dialogue, because that sounds like something that came off of a corporate training video. But
It does, but I know what you mean.
I really like hearing conversations about the different aspects of trade policy, the different aspects of foreign policy, even though some of those I might abhor, because you do have an opportunity to maybe not reset the stage in, kind of on the conservative right, if we want to make conservative the big tent word, which is pushing it a bit. How do we facilitate conversations that keep from instantly going to, if you aren't as far into this camp as possible, then all of a sudden the big tent's not a place for you?
Well, I think, first of all, great debate that you're bringing up.
Sorry, it's a hard one because I do want to facilitate it. It's a weird question. I know it gets a bit rambly, but I think it's one that's worth asking.
No, totally. And, here at Advancing American Freedom, we come more from the philosophy of, if the word is, I guess, traditional conservatism, Reagan conservatism. But the thing that I personally am most focused on here at Advancing American Freedom, making sure we have allies and friends, and at least people who will talk to us and we will talk to them across the conservative movement and beyond. Because, there's so much overlap, even between those two different camps, the main camps you talked about, the conservative movement. We have so much more in common and so many great relationships within the different camps, between the different camps, things like that. We just want to keep that going so that we're listening and partnering up exactly where we can, which is a lot of places.
And I really hope to see on some issues, especially things that the right as a general whole supports codifying into law. For example, the NPR and the PBS federal funding removal, that needs to be codified into law. There needs to be something very specific, very small bill that gets pushed through. What I want to see when that bill passes is I want to see kind of the Bush era Republicans. I've really grown out of favor with the term neocon because I think that everyone slaps it on everything. And the same with the populist side and the traditional conservative side. I want to see those three groups unite, even if it's temporary, to get that bill codified right now, all the way from the Tom Cottons and the Jim Banks, all the way over to the Lisa Murkowskis. That has to be brought through.
I think that's right. And that's something like you're saying the different factions can actually agree on. Not only the specific one, in this case, you mentioned, PBS, et cetera, NPR, but just that whole project as a whole. In other words, like, let's codify the Trump executive orders that he has put out, so many of which there is just wide agreement amongst all kinds of conservatives.
Exactly.
Let's get those into law. Let's make sure Congress is not funding things that the president is trying to defund, like NPR and PBS, right? Because Congress does have a history of kind of backfilling funding that, President Trump or other
page 643, 647, way there back in the bill. And the reason that I do have such a passion for this, and I think this is so useful, is the left does have this is something they've always been very strong in up until recently with the Schumer fiasco. You've had you've had Democrats that have said, look, I disagree with you on financial policy. You're more corporatist. I'm more progressive. So we're going to set that aside for a second and pass this whatever. I would really like to see Republicans say, look, in a minute, we're going to put on the boxing gloves and we're going to duke it out over trade policy. And God in heaven knows it's going to be a humdinger. But in the meantime, we're going to codify this thing because we know we agree on this. We have it ready to go, get it through so that we don't have to worry about it ever again. Done. presto.
That's a great point. That's something maybe we're all a little guilty of, right? Is sometimes we focus right in on the disagreements
Oh, I
instead
know
of saying,
I am.
right, why don't we check off some of the agreements first, get those done, low-hanging fruit, use that capital we've just built of collaboration to then tackle some of the stuff we disagree on. So yeah, couldn't agree with you more.
Paul Teller, unfortunately, speaking to the FCC, the time is cutting us just a bit short. So where can we head over to read more of what you guys are up to and see if we can funnel it through a little more?
Yeah, appreciate it. Either our website, advancingamericanfreedom.com, or on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it, either at PTeller, PTELLER, or at American Freedom. Either one, and we will see you online.
We'll make sure those are in the description of the Chiron. Pete, thank you very much for joining us. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast, and for the first time, I should say, to our audience over on Rumble, as well as YouTube and X, the podcast network radio side. Good to be with you. There will be a little bit of bonus Tonus tonight, and we've got quite a bit to dig into on our remaining time on the radio. This would be about one of the more brutally annoying clips currently going around. There is a guy who has decided to say that he's a trans man, Sam I am, but he's not a binary trans man, Sam I am, trans am from Siam. Here, I guess here you go.
I am a man. I'm a trans man, but I'm not a binary trans man. And there's that little distinction that's hard to explain, but is very important to my identity and my perception of myself.
Imagine being so fragile and weak that the entirety, identity, and perception of yourself is the difference between not like, oh, I'm a man, I'm a man, Jessica, yeah, but also that you're a non-binary man. Again, what does that mean?
The way that I can kind of explain it is that a cis man has not experienced the expansiveness of gender that I have experienced.
Is this his way of telling us that he... Is this his... Hey, yo! A straight guy has not experienced what I've experienced. How experienced?
A cis man has lived his whole life in this box. I lived way over there for years, and I know what it's like to be treated as a girl in society, and I know what it's like to be standing here like this at work and have one customer come up to me and confidently call me she, her.
You know, because you have like no protruding Adam's apple and you look like a girl.
And the next customer come up and confidently call me he, him.
Well, why the confidence? I'm looking at you and there's just confusion and like regret written all over it. I'm not sure.
I know what it's like to be perceived as every gender.
Wait a minute now. Every gender? I was reliably told that there were 837 genders and they're gender seasonal. They go back and forth and in and out, and it's just a magical time of spectrumosity. Amazing. This is that straight white maleness that she is embracing. It's the arrogance and I'm so confused.
I know what it's like for someone.
Correction, this person is so confused.
To look at me and be deeply confused about what they're seeing.
I wonder why.
I don't fit quite in that little box of man.
Because you don't have the kind of tools that men need. And I'm not talking about Milwaukee.
Of male, of cis. That's not something that I've ever experienced. And I don't want to. I want to have this masculine base. I want...
Well, Tim Walz, I'm afraid you're falling a little short.
To create this person, I want to feel like I'm comfortable in my body, and then I want to expand off of that.
Why is it that every gendery video includes like acting tips for being in the Lorax? I want to expand and you know, start feeling who I am. I mean, my goodness, this is a special thing. So speaking of LGBTQ people, Democrat state senator of the California Assembly, Scott Wiener, not to be confused with Anthony Weiner, the disgraced ex-representative who Daily Signal's Jacob Adams pointed out is now running for the New York City Council. Democrat California State Senator Scott Wiener has made a few headlines by claiming that the sexual register, the sex offender registry, that's really harmful to, I guess, LGBTQ people.
We know that the sex offender registry contains a massive array of crimes, including, I don't know, having sex in a car or in a park. That gets you on the sex offender registry.
Yeah, because those are public places. Yeah. Having sex in the park. You know who else is in the park, usually around the playgrounds? Children.
We also know that LGBTQ people have been massively and disproportionately targeted and subjected to being slammed onto the sex offender registry. That's the whole history of the sex offender registry. So this aspect of the bill is incredibly overbroad and discriminatory.
You know, just a hot tip here for all you aspiring young lawmakers out there. If you're more concerned about who a bill offends rather than whom a bill protects, as far as their protecting the rights of, not being jailed with a sex offender, which again, what the bill would do in California, that would be to prevent women from being jailed with dudes on the sex offender registry. Again, putting an individual who has been convicted of sexual assault in the cell with a woman, I feel like that would be asking for trouble. Just, right off the top of the bat. But again, I understand that some of the people on that sex offender registry may not have experienced the full box of genders and what it means to be masculine. It's just great. Oh, the nonsense continues, and it continues quite quickly. All right, we want to get over to Gavin Newsom and Jen Psaki because the Democrats have now decided that they are going to make a distinction on when Joe Biden died. So his certificate of death has been really up for debate. Some believe that Biden to this day is still Einstein, cracking open E equals MC. And then the other crew of the Democrats recognizes that the man is a good 2 feet sticking out of the morgue drawer. So, as far as Biden's concerned, I love watching the Democrats now that, again, they have finally realized maybe it wasn't a good idea to pass off the dead guy as the next president of the United States. So they've decided that they're going to finally draw a line since, now the media's actually come out and gone, yeah, maybe we missed a little something, is the cool media way of saying covered it up overtly and attacked those who reported on it. So Gavin Newsom was the first guy to come out and set the standard for when you were allowed to say, maybe Biden doesn't have a pulse. This was Newsom back in February, and this ended up being the line that all of the left is going to use from that point forward.
We lost. We lost the popular vote, and we lost the electoral vote. We got crushed. And we need to be humble about that, and we need to have some grace, and we need to understand why. Was it because of the incumbency penalty? Was it because of inflation? Was it because of interest rates? Was it because of immigration? Was it because we were too, quote unquote, woke? Was it because of the issues with Israel? Was it all of the above? I think we are going through that forensic. We need to understand it.
I love that. We're going through that forensic. Again, I will point out that Adam Wren of Politico wrote an entire story on a group of moderate Democrats who went to Virginia to have a meeting where they suggested cool, fun, hip happening things to do, like go to church and go to gun shows and wave the American flag. And Ken Martin, the chair of the Democratic National Committee, and his vice chair, which I'm pretty sure is just Rachel Maddow with hair extensions, announced that was not allowed and the Democrat Party was just going to go further to the left. So I love the forensic angle. But anyway, here's Newsom. He's going to touch on something and divide that very thin Biden line they're going to walk.
At the same time, we also have to push back against the whitewaters and headwinds of the Trump administration.
But, you're leaving something very important off the list, Governor. You also ran a candidate who could not reliably talk, walk, or ride a bicycle. Take me into Gavin Newsom's soul when you had to tell reporters from around the world why the United States president could not complete a sentence.
Well, it was obviously we were challenged as it relates to that debate. But if you're asking about my soul, which I appreciate.
My soul. I like how he dips down into Matthew McConaughey there. Hey, you just dig down into your soul and you just see what's going on. Ka-chow. All right, that's what we're doing over here. Yeah, just Gavin Newsom, governor of California, dipping into my soul about Joe Biden. Sniff my daughter.
You're asking about my direct engagement and interactions with former President Joe Biden, who was not our nominee, but as it relates to his campaign.
He was your nominee, though. He was your nominee. You guys were not running anyone else. He had the de facto. That is a lie. And again, the reason I'm stopping up in front here is because I want you to understand how long it is taking Newsom on this BBC interview. He could answer the question. Again, the question which was asked 4.5 years ago. The question was, why did you lie about Joe Biden being dead? What did you feel in your soul? The man is stammering because he doesn't even know how he's going to answer this yet.
And what those decisions look like as it relates to his determination whether or not to continue that campaign or end it as he did. I never had, period, full stop. I would be lying to you, and I won't lie to you, as it relates to the direct engagement I had with Joe Biden that ever suggested a cognitive decline to the degree that we saw, at that debate night. And
look at the reporter. He's exhausted. Again, that's BBC, so that means they talk to people from India and Eastern Europe. So this man's used to long-winded people for no reason. And he's exhausted. I just asked you a simple question, Governor. If you can't, get it across yourself and figure out why you maybe shouldn't have run a mannequin. Or as we call them over in the UK, gollity smobble wobbles. Which also, by the way, is what Biden thinks the capital of Arkansas is. It's incredible. And then now, Jen Psaki. So again, that was the standard back in February, is I decided that we didn't notice any kind of decline until the first debate when they began by saying dearly beloved and Biden's coffin was rolled onto the stage. Jen Psaki, the press secretary of the White House, the first one, the one who said that she could not keep up with Joe, that he was faster than she was. Jen Psaki has just come out, it was either yesterday or today, and has announced we finally know when it's okay to say that Joe Biden was starting to push up daisies.
I left in May of 2022, just for the facts here, and I have seen Biden once since then.
Okay, so do you see what she's doing already? I haven't been around him. I am not responsible for this. I was nowhere near the rotting smell. I could not even smell. I had 2 Glade plugins jammed up my nostrils. I had no idea.
When I took my daughter to the holiday party this last December.
And then after Biden, threatened to throw her over a bush and talk about colored kids, I noticed, something might be up with the formerly alive president of the United States.
After he had lost. And so I hadn't seen him in person during that period of time.
Yeah, because that's the only place you see the president of the United States is in person. God knows we've certainly never been in a place where you could, see the president live calling lids at 10 a.m. all the ding dong dang time. Certainly not us all in rooms with 8 screens all over them.
I never saw that person, not a single time. And I was in the Oval Office every day. That was on that debate stage. I'm not a doctor. Aging happens quite quickly. Were things that people saw during that period of time.
Aging happens quite quickly. I mean, yeah, if they self-immolate like Aaron Bushnell. I mean, yeah, someone goes from alive to dead real quick if you hit them with a Ford Econoline van. Aging really quickly. Yeah, I would say that, again, the same crew that went after Republicans for not even Republican, independents, people on kind of the leaning left that were like, when he walked out in front of that crowd at the George Clooney fundraiser and Barack Obama had to come up like a Boy Scout and help him cross the stage, like, it's okay, Pops, we're going to go to your room. Maybe. You have had Obama showing up on the stage to Biden like Russell in Up. Hello, sir. You are the president. Do you need some assistance? Incredible stuff. And so finally, now they're going to say, well, we noticed that, Biden was dead and we all still again, said he was fine after the debate.
That were similar to that or would have been in a category of that? I don't know, possibly, right? And all these books are going to tell us.
Do you think that were they actively covering it up? Were they sort of in denial, or was
Here's the question.
Or was that just a bad debate? Like, what is your read on that?
Well, this is what I mean about cover up is a very loaded term.
Oh, the gall, the gaslighting of this woman to say, oh, that's a loaded term. Her entire industry, she is a commentator on MSNBC. Her entire job is to ask loaded questions. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the wife beater fallacy, when did you stop beating your wife, the original loaded question, I'm pretty sure that's etched as the golden rule above the mantle. That they all like smack before they go on air, like, going to a high school basketball game. Incredible. It's a loaded question. Cover up. I mean, sure, we had his wife holding stinking cabinet meetings. We had the auto pen because his bones were more osteoporotic than a 1970s Sex in the City ad. And so, kind of an out there joke. There was a really weird Sex in the City ad from like 2008 in which they shot it in a 1970s style. And famously, one of the guys like broke her arm on set. Sorry. Very, very obscure reference here at the end of the Tony Kinnett cast. Continue, Jen.
I think.
Well, it means you knew that it was really bad and you're pretending otherwise versus you're deluding yourself, which I think is what people do a lot.
Well, I understand, but I still think it's like cover up is often like a crime, right? We're talking when people use that term.
They say it's worse than the crime.
People use that term as they relate to Watergate or the covering up of not sharing public information about a war.
Yeah, I'm not.
I mean, yeah, I think that the president being dead and others making his decisions for him regarding the nuclear football, the death of Americans consistently, the death of our allies consistently, slow walking aid to our allies, and the prosecution directly of Christian groups, of parents who attended school board meetings. Yeah, I'd say that's kind of bad. FEMA not giving aid to people who had Trump signs in their lawns. Yeah, I'd say that's a rough one. So, in case you're ever wondering why the left is just falling apart, it's because they are going to go back to this exact same thing. They won't admit they were wrong. Gavin Newsom kind of can, and by that I mean he'll say it was wrong, and then he'll ramble for so long that you'll forget that the question was if he thinks he did something wrong, which I guess is kind of a talent. Maybe. At the best, it's like a guy who failed auctioneer school and just like kept rambling and never actually got to the numbers. So, beautiful stuff from the Dems. That'll about do it for the Tony Kinnett cast this evening. Thank you very, very much for stopping by. We'll be back tomorrow with a whole lot more. This is the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.